Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. She took the last shrimp skewer off my plate and offered it to my boss. That's the moment I realized something was seriously wrong. Hi, I'm Nolan. I know. I'm not supposed to introduce myself, but let's be honest, no one remembers guys like me anyway. I'm the one behind the spreadsheets, the quiet, "Hey, let me know if you need help with that guy." The one people thank but never invite. But tonight was supposed to be different. After 12 years at Thorne and Keller, I was finally the lead on a major client account. The company threw a big fancy event in my honor. My name was on the program. My face was printed on the banner. People I didn't even know were congratulating me, patting me on the back like I mattered. And April? She was supposed to be proud, supportive, present. Instead, she spent the entire night playing someone else's date. The shrimp thing wasn't even the worst of it. That came later. But it started there. When she reached across my plate, grabbed the skewer I hadn't even touched yet, turned to my boss, who, by the way, had already eaten 4, and said, "Here, you have to try this one. It's the best." I was mid-sentence, talking to her. She didn't blink, didn't apologize, didn't look at me. She just kept smiling at him like he was the sun and she hadn't seen light in years. I tried to let it go. I mean, who makes a big deal out of seafood? But I noticed a pattern. Every time I walked up to her, she drifted in the opposite direction, like oil pulling away from water. If she wasn't talking to my coworkers, she was laughing too loudly with the waitstaff, sipping white wine like she just discovered freedom. Me? I stood near the sponsor banner like a piece of branded furniture. At one point, I checked my reflection in the window. Not because I cared how I looked, but to see if I was even still there. The final blow came during the group photo. The photographer said, "Let's get the power couples up front." April stepped forward without me, stood next to Mason Reeve, my junior associate, the guy with perfect teeth and no depth perception. She even put her hand on his shoulder. I heard someone behind me whisper, "Oh, are they together?" I didn't correct them. I didn't say a word. Instead, I walked over to the dessert table, picked up a napkin, and wrote, "I'm leaving. Don't follow." I folded it into a triangle, the way she folds her notes when she's being playful, and tucked it under her wine glass while she posed, smiling like she hadn't once looked in my direction all night. No one stopped me as I walked out. No one even noticed. And April? She didn't realize I was gone. Until 2 hours later. By the time April realized I was gone, I was already sitting in the dark parking lot of a gas station 20 minutes away, staring at the steering wheel like it had answers. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there, wondering how I'd become a background character in my own life, and why it took a shrimp skewer and a forced smile to finally admit it. The first message came in at 11:47 p.m. "Where did you go?" I stared at it without blinking. A few seconds later, "Nolan? Seriously? Are you in the bathroom or something?" Then came the rapid fire. "This isn't funny. You left?" "What the hell, Nolan?" I didn't answer. I just watched the dots appear, disappear, and reappear like she was pacing in circles behind her screen. That should have satisfied some pathetic part of me, seeing her panic. But all I felt was empty. She never once said she missed me, never asked if I was okay, never even acknowledged what she did. You might think I'm being overly sensitive. Maybe I am. I've been told that before, by teachers, by coworkers, by April herself when I've brought up how invisible I feel around her. "You overthink everything," she always says. "Not everything's about you." But what if this time, just this once, it was supposed to be? This was my event, my achievement, my name on the program, my face on the welcome slides, my blood and sweat behind the entire campaign that just landed the company its biggest contract in 4 years. And she made the night about everyone but me. At midnight, she called. I didn't pick up. She called again, then again. Eventually, I turned the phone off and just drove. No destination, no plan, just movement. I passed diners full of late-night coffee drinkers, couples holding hands through neon-lit windows, and even saw a guy alone on a bench, eating fries with a content look on his face. I envied him, I envied all of them. Back home, the house felt like it belonged to strangers. Her heels were by the door. Her perfume still hung in the hallway. I stepped over a pile of unopened mail and walked straight to the guest room, locking the door behind me. And for the first time in years, I slept alone by choice. The morning would bring questions, excuses, maybe tears. She's good at that when she needs to be. But something had shifted in me that night. Not snapped, just slowly slid into place. Like a truth I'd kept shoving aside had finally settled where it belonged. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was tired. Tired of asking to be seen. And tired of pretending that love feels anything like this. When I opened the guest room door the next morning, the smell of bacon hit me like a trap. April never cooked breakfast. Ever. Our usual mornings were cold cereal and quiet resentment. But today, she had the griddle going, jazz music humming softly from the kitchen speaker, and a bright good morning, ready before I could even clear the hallway. I stood there, barefoot and unshaven, watching her flip pancakes in my t-shirt like last night hadn't happened, like she hadn't ghosted me at my own event, like she hadn't spent the evening fawning over coworkers she couldn't even name last week. I didn't say anything. I just stared. "Come on, don't be dramatic," she said, plating the food with a flourish. "I was just trying to help you network." That line. The one she always used when I brought up how she took over every room we entered. When I told her I felt erased in crowds, like I was just a placeholder until she found someone more interesting to talk to. "Networking," I repeated quietly, sliding into the chair. "So is that what it's called now?" She paused for a second. Her back stiffened, just enough to confirm that yes. She knew exactly what I meant. But instead of addressing it, she kept her tone light. "You know I'm good with people. I thought you'd appreciate me making a good impression." I stared at the pancakes, perfectly golden, a performance on a plate. "You didn't even notice I left." That made her turn. Not angrily, not yet. Just defensively. "Of course I noticed. Don't be ridiculous." "When?" I asked. "Be honest. What time did you realize I was gone?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Took a breath. "Around, maybe 11? I was looking for you and Mason said you'd left. I thought maybe you just stepped out for air." "Mason," I muttered. Of course Mason noticed. That stung her pride. She crossed her arms, now letting the mask slip a little. "Why are you acting like I committed a crime? You're always so touchy. I can't even talk to people without you turning it into some dramatic guilt trip." "There's a difference between talking and pretending I don't exist," I said, finally looking her in the eye. "Last night wasn't a one-off. It's who you are now. You perform for strangers and forget the man who drove you there." She rolled her eyes. "Oh please. You left me at the event, Nolan. You stormed off like a child and didn't even answer your phone." I stood up slowly. My appetite was gone. Because I realized I could vanish and no one would care. Not even you. That should terrify you, April. But it doesn't. Does it? She blinked. For the first time, her expression cracked. Just a little. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way. That's the problem," I whispered, heading back to the guest room. "You never mean to, but it always ends up this way." The door clicked shut behind me, and I sat on the edge of the bed, wondering when exactly I stopped being her partner and started being a prop. And somewhere deep down, I think she was starting to wonder the same. By Sunday afternoon, the silence between us had morphed into something heavier than anger. It was avoidance disguised as politeness. She tiptoed around the apartment like she was walking on glass, and I pretended not to notice every fake smile and half-hearted, "Do you need anything?" she tossed my way. I didn't respond. Couldn't. There was something raw in me still unraveling, like my insides were catching up to what my eyes had finally seen. A version of April that didn't need me. Maybe never did. She went out for a quick coffee run around 2. That's when my phone buzzed. Not hers, mine. I wasn't snooping. Let me be clear about that. The notification popped up on the home screen of my laptop, which was still connected to our shared cloud. It was from Mason, the guy she spent most of my work event glued to. "You were amazing the other night. Can't stop thinking about what you said. What she said. I stared at the message like it was in another language. There was no context, no emojis, no thread before it. Just that one line, floating like bait in clear water. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I knew I shouldn't open the full thread, that it wasn't meant for me. But my curiosity had already crossed the line. I clicked. There were only a few messages. Mason had texted her the next day too. Still thinking about our talk. Hope you're okay. And I'm here if things keep getting worse between you two. My stomach dropped. This wasn't professional. This wasn't friendly. This wasn't about networking. There was no direct mention of anything physical. No scandalous photos, no declarations of love. But the tone was unmistakably intimate. Confessional. Protective. Like she'd been venting to him about me. Like she'd been planting seeds for something beyond just emotional support. The worst part? Her replies had been deleted. Only his words remained, dangling like a half-burnt rope from a fire I hadn't even known was burning. I shut the laptop and sat there in stunned silence, my hands trembling. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. I wasn't wired for confrontation. But something about this quiet betrayal, it made my chest cave in. Not because I thought she was cheating, but because I realized she had found comfort somewhere else. And she didn't even bother hiding it. When she returned, iced lattes in hand and that familiar fake cheer in her voice, I didn't say a word. I didn't throw the laptop across the room or demand answers. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw a woman who had emotionally packed her bags long before I ever stepped out of that work event. She placed my coffee on the table, glanced at me, and frowned. You okay? I gave her the smallest nod I could manage. Yeah. Just thinking. She didn't press. Of course she didn't. I stared at the condensation forming on the cup, wondering how long it would take her to notice that I hadn't taken a sip. Wondering what she had said to Mason that night. Wondering when, exactly, I stopped being the man she came home to and started being the man she kept secrets from. But most of all, I wondered how much longer I'd keep pretending not to see it. The next few days passed like a strange play I couldn't stop watching. One where the actors kept forgetting their lines but still tried to pretend everything was fine. April didn't bring up the event again. Not a word about how she'd vanished into the crowd or how I'd slipped out unnoticed. No apology, no confrontation. Just this forced rhythm of normality. She'd text me midday with little updates like, "Don't forget we need eggs," or, "What do you want for dinner?" As if we hadn't both silently agreed to sweep the whole thing under the rug. But I couldn't forget Mason's text. It gnawed at me, louder than anything she said. And the more she avoided the topic, the more I started seeing patterns, things I'd missed before. The way she always locked her phone when I entered a room. How she started taking calls on the balcony even when it was cold. How her late meetings began happening more often, and always on Tuesdays. I didn't want to accuse her. I didn't want to fight. I wanted the truth to fall into my lap cleanly. Like a receipt or a forgotten voicemail. But it never does it? So I tested her. Nothing dramatic, not some wild plan or hidden camera. Just something subtle. I told her I had a work dinner Thursday night with a visiting client. That I'd be out late, possibly past midnight. Her reaction was underwhelming. She barely looked up from her phone. Okay, want me to leave some food out? That was it. No curiosity. No follow-up, just the quiet freedom of someone unbothered by her husband's absence. And maybe it's pathetic, but I expected something more. Jealousy, concern, a hint of suspicion. But nothing came. So Thursday night, I left the house in slacks and a dress shirt like I said I would. Except instead of dinner with clients, I drove 3 blocks down, parked near a closed bookstore, and sat in my car in the dark with the engine off. I stayed there from 6:45 to 11:10, just watching the clock, watching the phone. She didn't text, not once. When I came home quietly, I saw the lights off in the living room, but the soft glow from her side of the bed still lit up the hallway. The door was cracked. I crept down the hall, slow and silent, and I heard it, her voice, soft, not quite whispering, but too gentle to be casual. "I just don't know how much longer I can keep pretending," she said. Silence. Then, no, he hasn't said anything. It's like he's just given up. I felt like I'd swallowed a nail. My foot froze mid-step. I couldn't hear the other voice. She was on speaker or headphones, maybe. But I didn't need to. I knew exactly who it was. Mason. I didn't go in. I backed away. Went to the couch and lay down with my coat still on. I stared at the ceiling for hours, heart pounding in my chest like a trapped bird. I kept thinking of all the times I begged her to talk to me, to tell me if she was unhappy, to see me again. And all along she had been speaking, just not to me. That night I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even move. I just lay there wondering how two people could live in the same home, under the same roof, breathing the same air, and still exist in completely different worlds. I was her husband, but she had stopped being my wife a long time ago. I don't usually wake up before April. She's always been the early riser, stretches before the mirror, coffee first thing, some podcast playing softly about productivity or mindset. But that morning, I was already up, sitting on the edge of the couch, fully dressed, with no intention of going anywhere. I hadn't slept. I hadn't moved much either. I just sat there all night, replaying her voice in my head. Her words, that quiet confession to someone who wasn't me. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending. It wasn't the words alone that shattered me. It was how effortlessly she said them, like it wasn't new, like she'd practiced them a dozen times before they ever left her lips. When she walked into the kitchen that morning, she jumped a little when she saw me. She hadn't expected me to be up, let alone dressed. I watched her scan the room like she was calculating her next move. Then she smiled. That same tight, forced smile I was starting to hate. "Didn't hear you come in last night," she said, opening the cabinet like it mattered. "How was dinner?" There it was. The test. The lie I'd fed her, tossed back at me like bait. I didn't blink. It got canceled. I came home early. Her hand froze for a second on the coffee tin. Barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Oh," she said too casually. "I must have been asleep." I stood up and walked over to the kitchen island, watching her pour water into the kettle like we were strangers at a hotel breakfast. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Who were you talking to last night?" She paused again. "Not long, but long enough." "What do you mean?" "In the bedroom, around 11. She still didn't turn around. "Just a friend. Couldn't sleep." I leaned on the counter. "Mason." That made her flinch. Just slightly, a shoulder twitch, a pause in her stirring. "Why would you think that?" she asked, finally turning to face me. "Because I heard you. Because I read the message. Because I saw the way you looked at him the night I stood alone at my own event, watching you become someone else." But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I looked her in the eyes and said, "You talk to him more than you talk to me." April let out a slow breath, like she'd been holding it all along. "We're just friends. He listens. That's all." I nodded slowly. "And me?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That silence was everything. It was the death rattle of a marriage stretched so thin it had become invisible. "I don't want to fight," she whispered after a moment. "I'm just tired, and I don't know how to fix whatever this is anymore." That's when I realized. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't asking to rebuild. She was trying to soften the landing. I pushed off the counter, walked past her, and grabbed my keys. Her voice followed me, weak and unsure. "Where are you going?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I need to be somewhere I'm not constantly erased." And with that, I stepped out the door. Not forever. Not yet. But for the first time, I left without telling her when, or if, I'd be back. I didn't plan to stay out overnight. I didn't even pack a bag. I just drove, without music, without a direction, without a single thought beyond putting distance between me and that house. Somewhere along the way, I found myself parked outside an old motel I hadn't seen since college. It was the kind of place that still used actual keys and smelled like lemon cleaner and old pillows. I paid in cash, ignored the receptionist's raised eyebrow, and collapsed on the lumpy mattress without even pulling the blanket down. It wasn't the betrayal that broke me, not entirely. It was the quiet unraveling of someone I used to know so well. April used to hold my hand when I was nervous in public. She used to laugh at my awful jokes even when no one else did. She once sent me a video of herself singing Happy Birthday while holding a cupcake in each hand because I'd said I felt invisible that week. And now I had to lie about business dinners just to see if she'd notice I was gone. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I opened my phone and stared at the blank screen for a while. No missed calls, no messages. Just the time, slowly crawling past 6 a.m. Like it knew I wasn't ready for it to be morning. Then, at 6:11, her name finally appeared. A single message. Where are you? Not are you okay? Or please come home. Just those 3 sterile words. I didn't respond. Couldn't. I just stared at the motel ceiling, the cracked paint on the light fixture above me, wondering if this was the part where I finally admit that whatever we had. It died a long time ago. Eventually, I drove back. Not because I wanted to, but because part of me still held on to the hope that she might be standing there, panicked, with red eyes and open arms, saying she made a mistake, that she missed me, that she was sorry. But when I opened the door, she wasn't there. The kitchen was clean, too clean. The coffee pot was empty. Her shoes were gone. Her bag too. No note. No calls. I set my keys down on the counter and walked into the bedroom. That's when I saw it. Not a message from her. Piece of paper. One I'd left behind on the nightstand when I rushed out. A page torn from my old journal. Something I hadn't meant for her to read. I had scribbled on it the night after the work event. Half delirious from humiliation and hurt. Just a thought. If she can't see me now, she never will. She had underlined that sentence. Then, next to it, she wrote one word in her sharp, rushed handwriting. Maybe. That single word said everything. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't regret. It was a confirmation wrapped in hesitation. Maybe I was right. Maybe she couldn't see me. Maybe she never did. I stood there holding that note, reading it over and over until the meaning stopped shifting. She read it. She understood it. And she still left. And for the first time since this began, I felt something unfamiliar, clarity. I didn't hear from April again that day, or the day after. There was no dramatic apology, no teary confession at the door. She didn't come home that night or the next. And strangely, that silence, the same silence that once felt like punishment, started to feel like peace. I stayed in the house for a few days, not because I hoped she'd return, but because I needed to understand what I wanted if she didn't. And the more I sat with it, the more I realized something no one ever teaches you in marriage. Sometimes the relationship doesn't die with a fight. Sometimes it just quietly dissolves into absence. And when it does, that's not failure. That's truth. I called a lawyer the following Monday. Not because I was angry, but because I finally felt honest enough with myself to admit that we were no longer building anything together. April and I had become 2 people with overlapping routines, not a life. And no amount of couples brunches or anniversary dinners was going to change that. When she finally texted 3 days later, it was short. I think you're right. I haven't seen you in a long time. Maybe it's time we both stop pretending. There was no venom in it, just tired honesty. And oddly, I respected her for that. We didn't scream. We didn't break things. We just stopped lying, to each other and to ourselves. Weeks passed. The divorce process began, quiet, clean. And I started noticing things again. The way morning sunlight lit up the old armchair I never used. The smell of coffee brewing, my coffee, the kind I liked. The way I could finally breathe in my own space. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And one night, months later, I found myself sitting at a small open mic night downtown. Not because someone dragged me there, but because I wanted to go. I listened to strangers sing songs they wrote in heartbreak, in healing, in joy. And when it was over, I clapped so hard my hands hurt. A girl beside me laughed and said, "You clap like you know what they've been through." I smiled. Maybe I do. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was a moment. And that's more than I'd had in years. Thank you for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever been in a moment where silence said more than words, or you've had to walk away to finally be seen, Share your story in the comments. What's one historical event where a person's quiet exit changed everything? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories just like this.